Nigerians to the whistleblowing policy of the administration. Now, many say it is a patriotic zeal and a commitment to uproot the cankerworm of corruption in the country by exposing the looter and his loot.
Well, Kingsley, beyond the zeal, for some others, they believe the attraction is the money that has been introduced as a financial reward of between 2.5% and 5% compensation to any whistleblower from the total amount recovered. Now, in some other climes, whistleblowers have legal protection. Now, this is why Nigeria's own National Assembly is currently working on the passage of a whistleblower protection bill, which is meant to protect persons who expose financial impropriety and corruption in public and private organizations. Now, the bill, which is before the National Assembly, has passed second reading. Now, the question to ask again now, does the whistleblowing policy work? What fresh impetus has it brought to the anti-corruption war of the Buhari administration? And what protection are in place to actually protect, well, at least to safeguard the life and other integrity of the whistleblower? These are some of the questions we shall try to provide answers to when our guests join us much later in the discussion part of the program. My name is Blessing Abu. Welcome to the program.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Blessing in welcoming you to today's edition of the program, coming to you as always live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, that's the Nigerian Television Authority. We are here at the headquarters studios in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. In the course of the program, we shall also bring you our regular complimentary segments, including newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, we're going over to the newsroom now, and here is Ann Jibuno with the morning news. Hi, Ann.
Hello, Kingsley, and hello, Blessing. Good morning. Welcome to the news. In what is called a gas revolution, and following the renewed interactive engagements of the federal government with oil-producing communities in the Niger Delta region, a plan to put in place a gas industrial park that is valued at about $20 billion through a public-private partnership model is now in process. The reforms captured in the 7 big wins of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources are commendable and must be sustained as Nigeria's oil and gas industry will hold sway for many more years despite diversification moves. These are the words of the Secretary General of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, Dr. Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo, at an interactive meeting with the Minister of Petroleum Resources as part of his member state visit.
We'd like to use this opportunity to urge all colleagues and industry chieftains to rally round the Honorable Minister in order to march forward. Despite all the reform programs on diversification which we support, and we should support wholly, diversification in its true form remains, for now, music for the future.
Meanwhile, the Senate Committee on Gas has queried the National Petroleum Investment Management Services over lack of due process during its presentation of the 2016 budget performance. While the company's account in 2017 showed a deficit balance, the committee believes that the account has some inconsistencies.
You have a balance of $200 and something million. Is the money there?
The balance is normally take money from.
So the money is there?
The money is there.
But
that's the fiscal cash, everything is supposed to be with CBN. And what CBN normally does is when we make cash.
No, this is actual CBN release, which means that you've been funded to this amount for 2016. I'm not talking about CBN. This is actual CBN release.
Umuahia, the Abia state capital, played host to the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture's town hall meeting series. The special edition of the outing was also used to launch the federal government's Change Begins With Me campaign at the state level. Anthony Forson reports that Abia was showcased as the state with the capacity for industrial revolution.
I can boldly say that Abia state is a pace setter. Today, the state supplies high-quality military boots to our military, and that is just one of such impressive ventures by the state.
The cashews we're going to produce here will also have to be processed. Vietnam is the #1 processor of cashew nuts now, and we're looking at about 6 major cashew processing factories in the country.
Leather goods and garments and so on, where Aba is already world famous or well known. We want to make sure that we put one of the industrial zones that the federal government has approved in the budget. We want to make sure one of them comes as close as possible to Aba.
The Federal High Court sitting in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State has directed INEC to issue certificate of return to Basi Etim as Senator-elect for Akwa Ibom North-East Senatorial District. The presiding judge, Justice Fatun Riman, in a judgment, ruled that both the PDP and the sitting Senator Basi Albert could not prove that Basi Etim was not the authentic winner of the PDP primary election conducted in 2014.
Whatsoever in my mind, that judgment will stand.
As counsel who listened to the judgment, I'm not satisfied with the judgment.
Meanwhile, Senator Basi Albert Akpan, representing Akwa Ibom North-East Senatorial District, has directed his lawyers to appeal against the judgment. In his reaction, Senator Akpan said the judgment is biased, which culminated in his earlier petition to the National Judicial Council and the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court in November 2016 on the matter. He wants the people of Akwa Ibom North-East Senatorial District to know that the judgment is not final. Well, less than a week after the reopening of the PDP National Secretariat by its chairman, Senator Ali Modu Sharif, protesters have besieged the Secretariat, demanding that Sharif should vacate the office. This is coming as the Makarfi group is calling on the police to stop occupation of the Secretariat by the Sharif leadership. In the next 2 years, Ondo State will commence exploration and exportation of bitumen, while plans are underway for the establishment of a cement factory and rejuvenation of cocoa. The state governor, Rotimi Akeredolu, stated this at his maiden meeting with civil servants on his first working day in office.
We need is to grow a civil service that we should be proud of. The days of Adebos and Co., let us see whether we can reenact that in Ondo State.
Well, that's the news for now, and we'll take Blessing and Kingsley right after this break. Thanks for watching.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. For our business market this morning, we're told that more employees in both public and private sector have continued to sign up to the contributory pension scheme. This is according to a report released by the National Pension Commission. For details, let's find out from Kolo Mohammed.
The number of workers that signed to the contributory pension scheme rose to 7.34 million at the end of the 2016 financial period. The National Pension Commission said this in a report that the figure rose from 6.39 million at the end of 2014 to 6.88 million in 2015. The Commission also disclosed that the figure was 6.39 million in 2012 before rising to 5.91 million in 2013. The Pension Reform Act was enacted to provide contributory scheme for the payment of retirement benefits of employees in both public and private sectors. The Act mandates every employee to open a retirement savings account in their name with any pension fund administrator of their choice and notify their employers. Employers, in turn, according to the law, are required to deduct 8% of the worker's monthly emolument and add another 10%, which will be paid into each employer's retirement savings account not later than 7 days after salary is paid. And the current national narrative in the aviation sector is the closing of Abuja Airport for repairs and movement to Kaduna Airport. While many see a downturn in aviation business in the country, experts believe the period after the repairs looks bright.
One, we have a good airport. It may attract other carriers. We'll go into a lot of bilateral agreement with other countries on the issue of aviation. We're likely to have a national carrier, but it's likely to be a destination where everybody think of.
The Central Bank of Nigeria says the cashless Nigeria policy has reduced the cost of banking services, increased awareness and usage of electronic channels, and improved the effectiveness of the CBN's monetary policy. The Deputy Governor of Operations CBN, Mr. Adebayo Adelabu, who stated this, said the policy has also fostered transparency in the economy. He spoke at the second anniversary of the Electronic Payment Incentive Scheme initiated by the CBN in collaboration with the Nigerian Interbank Settlement System. The scheme was designed to reward banks and other stakeholders in the e-payment subsector. The Central Bank of Nigeria has received a total fresh bid of $221.3 million from 16 deposit money banks in the country. This followed last week's modification of the foreign exchange policy by the CBN, which saw the reduction of the tenor of the regulator's forward sales from 180 days to 60 days from the date of transaction. The amount is expected to be released to the 16 banks within the next 30 to 60 days under the second round of intervention by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And from the equities market, a graphic summary of the latest closing figures. That's Business News. I'm Kolo Muhammad.
All right, thank you very much there for the business package. Next for us now is a look at the headlines in some of today's newspapers.
Welcome back to Abu, who has joined us again this morning. Take a look at the papers. Good morning to you, Bayo.
Good morning, Leslie. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, pleasure to have you here with us. Let's take a look now at the front page of the Nation newspaper, which is our first presidency. That's the kicker for that. Oshibajo is executing Buhari's policies, with the rider opposition trying to cause division between president and his vice. Of course, there's a rider there, which is a quote accepted from the story. Now, details of the story can also be found not just on the front page, but also inside. Above the nameplate of the Nation newspaper, another headline: suspected kidnappers paraded in Abuja, and police recover AK-49 and other live ammunition. High Court sacks PDP senator, and NFF worried about Trust Ekong's gen status. and Defense Headquarters wants amnesty, and others. Now, the other headlines on the front page of the Nation newspaper: South Africa attacks on Nigerians and others continue. South African attacks on Nigerians and others continue, and you can see the protests, the photographs from the protests there saying, "Say no to xenophobia in South Africa." PDP crisis. Bekarifi warns of breakdown of law and order. That's a bit fuzzy. I can't say that quite clearly. It's not sharp enough. Now, Naira gets more as CBN pumps in $180 million. Now, those are the headlines we're taking in the meantime from the front page of the Nation newspaper.
Okay, let's quickly go to the front page of the Nigerian Pilot. Just below the nameplate, federal government committed to revamping agricultural sector. This is coming from Acting President Yemi Osinbajo. You find that story on page 4. Presidency appoints new management for NCAA. That story you find on page 5. And just below that, you have this rider. Empower, federal government to hire additional 350,000 graduates. Leading for the Nigerian Pilot is a business report. Dollar to crash again. The rider, as Central Bank of Nigeria floods market with fresh $180 million. That's trending on page 4. Xenophobic attacks. That story is right after the photograph. TUC, as a trade union congress, demands recall of Nigerian envoy to South Africa. The rider wants no country has monopoly of violence. That story starts right there, but continues on page 5. Some worrying health report in the news we find on page 4. Bird flu kills 40,000 birds in Plateau. And Delta communities give NDDC and Chevron 21-day ultimatum. To page 6 now, you find this raft of stories. Bennett to file criminal charges against 26 indicted ex-governor Suswan officials. Amechi, a contradiction of Buhari's anti-corruption war. That story is still on page 6. And still on page 6, we find a story. Court sacks Akwa Ibom senator, orders refund of all allowances. Bayo.
Yes. Dollar that was speeding on the highway of speculation and hoarding has met the roadblock of central bank.
So it's racing back.
It's crashing. Traders of foreign exchange say the intervention by central bank has gone a long way to further enhance the strength of the naira. Punch reports that now the exchange is at 445 to a dollar. However, the Nation reports that it has dropped to as low as 430 from the 450 over the weekend. And the papers observe that the increased liquidity by the central bank has enabled the gains of over what is described as 85 naira in 1 week. A central bank is reported to have released $100 million into the wholesale reform market, while $80 million is for personal costs covering school fees, medicals, and personal travel allowances. Meanwhile, Naira is expected to make further gains, according to analysts, and they are hoping that the 300 Naira mark will eventually be made. In fact, some of the analysts are even lamenting that had central bank taken these measures 9 months ago, the Naira would not have been on the free fall. Talking about the economy, the other aspect also is petroleum, which is the mainstay of our economy, in spite of our initiatives at diversification. The members of the Petroleum Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries have lost about $1 trillion due to dwindling oil resources. The Secretary General of the organization, Dr. Mohamed Barakido, says that between 2014 and January 2016, not only could members not earn 1 trillion naira, they also lost an equivalent of 1 trillion naira in terms of deferred projects and investments. However, he said OPEC, for the first time, has put in place a platform for its 24 members to address the stock overhang. He says within 6 months, the variable of supply equation that sent the market off balance has been addressed. Furthermore, the energy laws has turned a historic page for the cartel. The industry is pulling out of its worst recession and will restore stability for continuous investment. So some good news there.
That's right, Bayo. That's it's heartwarming. In the meantime, we hope that in the medium to longer term, all of this will be sustained. Because one of the critical issues about the value of an naira it has to do with the supply side rather than more of the demand side. So if we have more dollars available in the market, obviously the rule of demand and supply will avail those who are buying and then those who are also selling.
In fact, the immediate impact is on those who are speculating and hoarding. They are now forced to bring out what they've been hiding because central bank has now flooded the market. If not, it will be valueless to them.
That's right. Speculation has its dangers. So these are the hazards. And so you win big and then you also lose big. So now they are losing big. And all right, let's take a look at the front page of This Day newspaper. This Day newspaper, above the nameplate, of course, is still above the nameplate. You have the headline there talking about the rise of the naira. Naira strengthens to 435 to the dollar on CBN dollar glut. And then you have there another $180 million sold for visible and invisible transactions. And Travelex to get $4 million weekly at Lagos and Abuja airports. And currency speculators would suffer, central bank warns. Imo, Sokoto, and Kaduna PDP reject Sheriff. Now the lead story, of course, is on politics. Says Tinubu prepares for presidential run, dumps PDP mega party alliance. You have a number of riders there. Pences down possible running mates, and presidential aide alleges plot to cause rift between Buhari and Oshibanjo, and says president remains in charge. Lai Mohammed, that's the kicker for that rider. I spoke to Buhari Saturday. His condition not critical. South Africans attack more Nigerians. That's the other headline on the front page of This Day. Listen.
Okay, quickly to the Authority newspaper. Just above the nameplate, we have the stories. Rivers PDP alert on plot to frame Wanosike and Sekibo, others. That story is on page 4. Still on page 4, Victor's challenge at tribunals won't be inaugurated. This comes from the Electoral Committee. Police inspector, 13 others arrested with 6 million naira Indian hemp. That story found on page 2. Leading for the Authority, federal government reads Riot Act to arms-bearing herdsmen, with 2 riders apologizes to victims and trains special farm guards. The photograph you have there is that of a delegation from OPEC on a visit to Nigeria. Buhari not critically ill, still in charge. This is coming from the presidency. Story starts there, but continues on page 2. Bayo?
Yes, there was that xenophobic attack report that Kingsley read earlier on, where you recall that the ones that were reported last week were actually at West Pretoria. It has now extended to a suburb of Johannesburg that is called Jeppestown. The police say that shops were ransacked overnight. However, the police spokesman is identified as Matabelo Peters. He says that they are waiting for the owners to come forward so that they could open the cases of violence and damage to property. The anti-immigration violence has been against the background of record of unemployment and allegation that some of these foreigners are engaged in drug trafficking. Former President Shehu Shagari has called for support for President Muhammad Buhari. Alhaji Shehu Ali Usman Shagari, who clocked 92 over the weekend, said Buhari is an honest, incorruptible, and detribalized leader. He said he was doggedly fighting corruption to sanitize governance. Therefore, he needed the prayers and the support of all Nigerians. He says a leader strives to salvage the country from anti-Nigerian forces deserves our prayers rather than curses. His son, Captain Bala Shagari, described the father as a humble and disciplined father that they are proud to have. Dr. Bukola Saraki, a Senate president, said Nigeria still needs the counsel and prayers of former President Shehu Ali Usman Shagari. And over the weekend too, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, in the prelude to his 80th birthday, also said he is grateful to God because God has been very partial with him. And across in Matabele land, President Robert Mugabe also was there for celebrations for his birthday. And President Mugabe said, people who are busy forming their own group are saying, Mr. Mugabe must go. I asked myself, where should I go? He spoke for another 1 hour, and he said he will not impose a successor. However, if ZANU-PF party felt he should retire, there will be an extraordinary Congress to choose a new leader.
Well, at the appropriate time, all of that will be sorted out. Bayo, let's go over quickly to page 2 of the Sun newspaper. Page 2 of the Sun newspaper. There's a worrisome headline there. It says, diarrhea outbreak. Queen's College shot over death of 2 students. Queen's College, of course, is at Yaba in Lagos. The 2 students were said to have, along with their colleagues, taken a meal of spaghetti and, of course, drank water in the school cafeteria, and subsequently, suffered from diarrhea. 2 of them have passed on, and our senior secondary school students of the school have been sent home. So, Queen's College shot over death of 2 students. That's the headline there from page 2 of the Sun newspaper. And then let's return to another newspaper now, namely the New Telegraph. New Telegraph, above the nameplate, says Labour Party sacks national chairman and 2 others. We read that already. One Salam, and deposed officials prosecuted by EFCC. And then below the name flag, amongst the window of headlines there, Biafra, Masop begins recruitment of new members. That's it. And then also the lead story says 2019, PDP governors maul new political party. With a rider, police have taken sides with Sheriff, that's according to McCarthy, and accuses Buhari's minister of luring members. Details of that story can be found on page 2. Now, the photograph there says, with a caption, Lagos to crush 4,000 impounded motorcycles. Details of that story can be found on page 9. Lagos to crush 4,000 impounded motorcycles. Bayo.
Well, it's very sad. You will recall that just only a matter of about 16 years ago, motorcycles became a campaign item. In fact, across the country, you find politicians gathering youths and using government money to provide motorcycles for them as a means of livelihood. Sadly, today, what we have is that the same government agencies are now impounding the motorcycles for it. Well, the other story of concern is that 41 Nigerian girls who are victims of human trafficking have arrived from Mali, Bamako. And it took the collaboration of 4 government agencies to get them here. Ministry of Defense, the Air Force, the Office of the Special Advisor to the President on Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, and the National Agency, NATIP, for trafficking in human persons. And the girls were trafficked by what Honorable Abike Dabiri described as some big madams. 6 of them have been arrested.
All right, Bayo. That's the much you can take on today's review. Kingsley?
Yeah, that's right. Those are the headlines that we have. Bayo, thank you for being with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be another day. Thank you for having me.
We have time to discuss one topic, but that will be for another day if it comes. So that does it for our newspaper review segment. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with the efficacy of the new whistleblower policy of the Buhari administration. The number of whistles are out there, the number of blowers are also out there. All right.
Call of change, stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to so let the change begin from within. Look at you, oh Gerula. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change
There are over 250,000 street children in Lagos.
The Street Childcare and Welfare Initiative is a sanctuary for street children and runaways. Rotimi Aziz was one such child. 3 years ago, his life was the streets.
It's hard to sleep on the floor because sometimes rain fall and beat us on the floor while we are sleeping outside. So we experience a whole lot of bad things on the street.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Garki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntapic2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, the much needed help at your doorstep.
If you just tuned in, the program is Good Morning Nigeria, showing live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. Now, as a prompt for our conversation this morning, taking a look at the whistleblower policy, we have this background report. The introduction of the whistleblower policy by the federal government has so far been adjudged a success. That's with the recovery of looted funds by individuals. Well, to set the tone, like I said, this is the background report as put together by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
A whistleblower is a person who exposes any kind of information or activities that is deemed illegal, unethical, or not correct within an organization that is either private or public. In the 19th century, the phrase whistleblower attached itself to law enforcement officials, while in the 1960s, the word began to be used by journalists for people who revealed wrongdoings. The act of whistleblowing was successful in countries, among others, the United States, Canada, India, and Jamaica. These countries, in their respective constitutions, provided acts for the protection and safety of whistleblowers. Joining this league of countries is Nigeria, with the anti-corruption drive of Buhari administration. So far, it has been adjudged an effective move by the administration in the recovery of looted funds by individuals. Recently, the government took a step further by introducing between 2.5% to 5% compensation to any whistleblower from the recovered loot.
What we've discovered is that most financial crimes, people know about them but are scared to speak up. So the whistleblower policy actually gives them protection against the consequences of doing the right thing in the public interest. And what it does is it encourages anyone with information about a violation of government's financial regulations, mismanagement of public funds and assets, fraud, financial malpractice, and other associated conduct to report it. It covers disclosure of information leading to the return of Nigeria's stolen or concealed funds and assets.
Whistleblowing is expected to provide agencies like the EFCC and the ICPC with actionable tips to track and recover stolen government funds. The whistleblowers need to provide key information through a secure online portal. As much as the whistleblowing plan of the federal government can be said to be yielding more fruits, observers say maybe increasing the compensation could be a better idea, as a looter can easily bribe his way through with more amount. Also, how protected indeed are whistleblowers?
All right, pertinent questions there asked by Oyeyemi Ajayi in that background report. Of course, we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as in Lagos to address issues pertaining to the whistleblowing policy. First, we'd like to welcome the Honorable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, learned senior advocate Abubakar Malami. Senior advocate, our pleasure to have you join us. So good morning, Nigeria.
My great pleasure as well. Thank you.
And then we also have with us in the studios here the Secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption, Professor Bolaji Owasonye. Prof, our pleasure to have you again on Good Morning, Nigeria.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, still in Abuja studio, we'd like to welcome to the studio this morning the Chief Whip of the House of Representatives, Honorable Ado Dogowa, is also part of the conversation this morning. Good morning to you, Honorable Dogowa.
Good morning and good morning, Nigerians. It's my pleasure being with you on this program.
And joining us via Skype from Lagos is Professor Oyewo. Oyewo is a former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Lagos. Professor Oyewo, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Good morning, and thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, our guest is an all-male cast. In any case, if you're at the bar, say gentlemen at the bar.
And gentlemen at the press.
Ado Dogo, of course, is a lawmaker, and then the other three guests, of course, are learned. So let's begin this conversation, of course, with the learned Attorney General of the Federation. For purposes of explication, what are the underlying principles that govern the whistleblowing policy unveiled 2 months ago?
Well, the underlying principles are multiple. The first on the agenda is the political goodwill, the desire to demonstrate the political goodwill. As you can rightly recall, Nigeria, under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, has been a signatory to United Nations conventions relating to fight against corruption. Nigeria was equally part and parcel of the countries, the package, the London Summit, and indeed the resolutions that was formulated in the London Summit, particularly as it relates to beneficial ownership, international consensus to deny the looters of the public funds access to international investment, access to political asylum, were equally policies that were developed, that were put across by Nigeria in the formulation of the communique that arose from the London Summit. Nigeria has equally enrolled as a member of the Open Government Partnership. And then above all, the need arose for carrying the public along, the civil society and the members of the public with the information. And above all, the political goodwill was a demonstration of transparency, accountability, and indeed carrying the public along. So it is a kind of consensus building towards a direction of exposing corruption, mismanagement in public resources, and above all, enacting the political desire of the government to ensure accountability, transparency, and indeed international collaboration as it relates to the fight against corruption. So the bottom line is that of demonstration of political goodwill on the part of the government, carrying the public along, building a consensus between the judiciary, the legislature, and indeed the executive as it relates to the fight against corruption as an agenda.
All right, thank you very much. We'll come back to you. Professor Owasonye, whistleblower policy, that whistleblower or whistleblowing, I think either of them is correct. Does this, in a sense, reflect a frustration with the orthodox means normally of eliciting or gathering information or intelligence that could then relate to the discovery of malfeasance or outright theft or corruption?
No, I won't say it's a reflection of frustration, but a complement. In every jurisdiction globally, whistleblowing policies are used to enhance, to improve, to support, and to complement the effort of law enforcement agencies to improve governance. Don't forget that this whistleblower policy, even though we have sort of focused a bit more on the reward policy, but there are other components of it, indeed. The whistleblowing policy focuses also on information about wrongdoing, not necessarily about money that has been stolen. Wrongdoing that is inimical to the health of government. And if you give that information, it will be investigated, and then the processes can be improved. So it's very wide and all-encompassing. So it's a compliment. And I think that it underscores the importance and the understanding of the fact that as citizens, we aid governance when we give information to government to help govern very well. I mean, the police, long before this whistleblower policy came up, had their own sort of whistleblowing policy. When they if you don't give information to the police, it's like whistleblowing too. How are they going to be able to protect us? And they say, armed robber, no be spiritual. Now, person like you and me, what are they trying to say? They say, if you know of someone who is living a lifestyle that is suspicious, let us know. It's the same thing. So it's something that's a policy that has been around with us. But as the Attorney General said, given the current government's determination and the political will to fight corruption, you need a whistleblower policy to enhance that. Because the nature of corruption itself is a crime that is surreptitiously engaged in. People don't broadcast when they've done things like that. And the whistleblower policy talks about violations of key legislations, for example, the procurement legislation. If people are not following due process in procurement, if people are not following the fiscal governance regulations of government, if people are frustrating the Treasury single account policy of government, if people are diverting, these are covered in the whistleblowing policy. But of course, we've celebrated a bit more the reward because everybody is surprised that government is willing to reward whistleblowers. But that should not even be a surprise because globally, in some other countries, the reward policy is far, far enhanced. And if this conversation gets that far, I will be willing to talk about that.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Balajo Asonye. Now, let's feel the pulse of Honorable Adodogoa. Yes, this is a policy embraced in the last 2 months, and for the House already, as in the National Assembly, taking a look at legislation in this part. How far gone have we in taking this aspect of whistleblowing as a bill?
Let me say once again, good morning, Nigerians. It's my pleasure being on this program at this moment. But I would like to, first of all, start by really saying, without any fear of contradiction, that while the National Assembly as an institution has every commitment whatsoever to support the government in the fight against corruption, we will also do whatever we could to make sure that Nigeria becomes a corruption-free nation. But the concern of the National Assembly has always been this. The executive arm of government, which of course is charged with the responsibility of implementing some of the laws we make for the land, for the country. And there is also the need for the executive arm of government to drive whatever policy that they think is in the best interest of the government as an administration and also in the best interest of the federation as a people. But our concern in the National Assembly, much as we have every commitment to support the government in the fight against corruption, we also have that constitutional and institutional concern for playing by the rules. The fact remains that even in those countries that you think the whistleblowing policy or whistleblowing initiative is working, of course there must be legislations that back up such policies. And apparently, as it is in Nigeria, I want to say without any fear of contradiction, the Attorney General is right here, that we need to have that legislation. We need to have that legislative framework that will actually oversight and provide a coherent framework that will allow this policy to succeed. A situation whereby you have the kind of political culture we have in the country, socio-political culture we have in the country, that is in most cases driven by whimsical imagination, sometimes driven by even the desire to create mischief and even indict people unnecessarily, then certainly a policy of this nature must have to be based on a sound legal framework. And as I speak to you, I'm not aware whether the government has brought forward to the National Assembly their need to create a legislation either for us to provide a kind of protection for whistleblowers or also to provide for punishment where a whistleblower is found wanting. Nigeria is known to every one of you. Somebody can just rise out of a dream and begin to blow whistle, even where there is no cause for him to blow such a whistle. So our concern in the National Assembly has consistently remained to be not only the lawmakers of this country, but custodians of the existing laws of the country. I want to believe if the government will continue this policy without a backing law, a very strong and sound law that will guide the implementation of this policy, then certainly the process is likely to constitute an affront to the rule of law. It will also constitute an affront to even the constitutional right of our people, the liberty of our own people. So all I'm saying, as an individual and as an institution, the government is coming up with a policy that must be backed up by law, by a legal framework. And I want to say the National Assembly as a leadership, and also the National Assembly as an institution, right even in our own legislative agenda, the 8th Assembly legislative agenda, we support as well the crusade to fight against corruption. But I want to say, like I said, persistently, that the need to have a law in place will really make the government succeed in this program. But when you have a policy that has no place or is not accommodated in our extant rules and extant laws, then certainly there will be foul plays. Situation whereby somebody could just rise in a moment out of a dream, out of imagination, to blow whistles. Let me make reference, for instance, to the recent 2016 budgetary crisis. It is a very good example of whistle blowing. But a situation whereby somebody blows a whistle and you are now asking him to explain why are you blowing a whistle, and he could not justify. At the end of the day, on one hand, you are providing compensation for positive whistleblowers, but on the other hand, because of the absence of this legal framework, you have no punishment to punish a whistleblower that blows whistle for no reason.
All right, Honorable Ado Dogowa, thank you very much there. We'll come back to you as well as the other guests, of course, to discuss the legal framework to govern the implementation of the whistleblowing policy. But I would like us to return very briefly now again to the antecedent of the whistleblowing policy. And my question is going to Professor Oyewo, who is joining us via Skype from Lagos. Professor Oyewo, Professor Owason, you were speaking a moment ago, did indicate that we have had administrative instances of the whistleblowing policy, namely when the police tell us that, look, if you have any information about any person whom you suspect, come to us. And then we also have the whistleblowing policy embedded in the Freedom of Information Act. What then is the rationale, or how do we explain the energy that the whistleblowing policy has received in the last 2 months, resulting, as it were, in the disclosure of hundreds of millions of naira recovered from persons who have stashed them away?
Now, the Whistleblowers Act is part of the mechanism for dealing with corruption. It's a key component of transparency and accountability. Where you have the Whistleblowers Act, it complements existing legal framework, both for investigation and prosecution of corrupt practice. It's part of the conceptual and practical mechanism for bringing out government business into the public domain. This policy helps the anti-corruption campaign and fight by having those who have knowledge that otherwise not available with the public domain to approach appropriate authority. And what it does is it provides a scheme or framework for protecting such people. And it helps in being able to successfully prosecute and bring about conviction, which will serve as a deterrent for those who want to engage in corruption. And also, it helps the government to be able to deepen the fight against corruption, as opposed to the investigation that is being carried out by the anti-corruption agency. By having people come forward to volunteer information that would otherwise not be available to those agencies. And this also is incentivized, not only by compensatory, incentives, but also by protective incentives that the legislative framework will, provide. Now, we have such examples in our West African region. Indeed, Ghana went on to pass the Freedom of Information Act, and also the whistle.
Well, it looks like there's a freeze there on the Skype connection to Professor Oyewa in Lagos. Once we're able to reestablish that link, we'll go back to him to continue with his explanation, but of course along the lines of the other conversation. Senior Advocate and Attorney General of the Federation, of course, you listen to what Honorable Dogowa indicated. As it is now, the whistleblowing policy is moving along on the strength of administrative policy. When are we likely to see it graduate into law in terms of the full amplitude of, say, protection for a whistleblower, you know, and other matters that are appertain thereto?
Well, let me state right from the onset that the responsibility for lawmaking, as far as our Constitution and indeed the separation of powers is concerned, is substantially based on the legislature. So the idea of looking onto the executive, for example, for a legal framework in terms of a bill does not naturally arise, because the responsibility is substantially constitutionally vested in the legislature. But then, for further clarity's sake, I want to place on record that on the part of the executive, we have taken steps: one, to transmit to the National Assembly for promulgation the Proceeds of Crime Act, which has been pending before the National Assembly ever since the coming in place of this government. The Whistleblowers Bill also, which has equally been pending ever since the coming in place of this government, and associated bills that are intended to be all-encompassing components of the anti-corruption crusade. And most of these bills are pending before the National Assembly. So perhaps, to a larger degree, the whistleblower policy comes about on account of the fact that the National Assembly has not passed the bill, the Whistleblowers Bill, that has been pending before the National Assembly, and then the need arose arising from the international commitment of the government and the desire of the public to take ownership of the anti-corruption campaign. Then the need arose for the policy to come in place. So the whistleblowers policy, by and large, is a temporal policy that is intended to allow the public to take ownership of the anti-corruption campaign pending the passage of the Whistleblowers Act, among others. But then fundamentally and most importantly, the Proceeds of Crime Act is part of the component. And above all, Nigeria is equally signatory to Financial Action Task Force, which is expected to be in the country any moment from now, and we are going to be assessed on the basis of what we have done as it relates to the fight against corruption.
Very quickly, Honorable Minister, does the fact that it is not a law now diminish its effectiveness as a policy?
Well, not that, but the truth of the matter is, as you rightly know, the law carries more weight than a policy statement and a policy direction. But then for whatever it is, the fundamental thing is, with or without the law, the Constitution is clear as it relates to the fight against corruption and is one of the cardinal objectives of the government. So arising from the constitutional undertones that makes the fight against corruption a constitutional obligation of the government and indeed the general public, I think the whistleblowing policy as a policy cannot be said to be in any way diminished. But then the existence of a legal framework through the Whistleblowers Policy, Proceeds of Crime Act, will, at the end of the day, make it all-encompassing and indeed cover the field entirely.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. We'll return to Lagos, where Professor, you will still join us via Skype. Yes, we're trying to make some explanation. The question posed to you by Kingsley, but I'm sure you'd like to take this along. Now that we have some underlying issues about legislation as well as what the policy should actually hold, what does this make of this issue of whistleblowing against the fight on corruption here in the country?
Now, as the Honorable Attorney General has explained, the legal framework will have to be processed through the National Assembly. And there is a bill that was forwarded through the Nigerian Institute of Legislative Studies to the National Assembly on the Whistleblowers Act, which I know is a bill before the National Assembly now. So you have to go through the process of first reading, second reading, public hearing, and at the end of the day, it will be a legal framework that will be incorporated into the existing anti-corruption legal framework.
All right, Professor Oyewol, thank you again. We'll come back to you. We hope that your Skype connection will remain steady. Professor Wasonye, just before we return to Honorable Adodogowa to talk about the legislative aspect to all of this, let's examine in greater detail now the whistleblower policy in action in Nigeria. I mean, since December, we have seen, the effect of, Nigerians coming forward with information to disclose, and then what the results have been. So, how does the whistleblower policy work in Nigeria at the moment?
I think that as the public review and your review has showed, it's been very successful, hugely successful, which shows the, should I say, the acceptability of the policy itself by the public. But I do not want to forget one quick point to ride on from the comments of Honorable Dogowa. First of all, this very whistleblower bill that was put in the 7th Legislative Assembly was passed. It was passed. But it was passed amongst those 53 legislations in the dying days of that administration. And it's one of those bills that eventually were not assented to. What that means is that the Attorney General has said, and Professor Yowo has also said, the whistleblower bill is presently before the National Assembly. Within their own rules, they can waive the first, second, third reading business, because this is something that has passed through them before, satisfy themselves that it is the same thing, or if they want to tweak anything, and pass it. And they could pass it in record time before the Financial Action Task Force gets there. That's number one. Number two, the concerns of Honorable Dogowa are completely assured in the policy. He says if you give a frivolous whistle blowing, it ends up in nothing. If I say, Kingsley, that you have done something wrong and it's investigated and there's nothing out of it, end of story. End of story. Now, the whistle blowing policy is not designed only to help recover money. I did say that it's also a governance tool. Somebody is doing something inappropriately, okay? So if somebody blows the whistle that, oh, there are things going on in NTA that shouldn't be going on, they're not saying money has been stolen. They're saying certain processes are being bypassed, the laws are being violated. Now, it can be investigated and lead to systemic reforms, not necessarily recovery of money. And if you give a malicious information, not true, damages somebody, the policy itself, in fact, recognizes penalty for malicious and extant laws. Also, even without whistleblower bill or act, extant laws also recognize if you give information that is untrue, that diminishes, you can be punished for all that. I think we need to recognize that the whistleblower policy itself, if it does turn into a law, an act, which is what we want, it simply aggregates snippets of provisions we have already in different legislations. It puts them into one comprehensive bill and then says, apply. In other words, there is nothing, perhaps, beyond the reward policy that is new, that you find citizens are already obliged to report crime under our criminal justice. If you see a crime, you have an obligation to report. You don't need a whistleblower policy for that. The only unique thing is the component of the reward policy. Even under some extant legislations, you get a compensation. if you've been victimized in some way and all that. So I think we need to make that clear. Now, as to how has it resonated? You said it. Since it was released, millions of naira and dollars have been recovered that government would otherwise not have known about. Now, the policy itself says very clearly, the reward policy, the information being brought forward, must be one that is not available to law enforcement agencies. It must be information that would not otherwise be obtainable. It must be information that is not in the public domain. So you cannot come and tell law enforcement agency or the Attorney General that you have information about something that is already within his possession. You know, you get nothing for that. So we need to understand, and people need to study the policy.
Just restate that again, because that's one of the key operational guidelines for the policy, I believe. Just restate it for the benefit of
It's important
audience.
that the public understand, and everybody, that the whistleblower policy covers information that is otherwise not available to government or law enforcement agencies, maybe on a crime that has been committed, a misdeed, violation of a law, and all that. You cannot claim a reward policy for something, for example, that any of the anti-corruption agencies or law enforcement are already investigating, and they've just not made it public, because there are many areas in which investigation is going on that people don't know about. It is when it crystallizes in a result that you get to hear anything about it. Now, if you don't know that something is being done about a particular process, and then you come with information, it is possible that your information helps to accelerate the investigation. It is possible that your information makes it less costly for government to complete the investigation. All of this will be evaluated in, quote and unquote, the compensation policy. And I also need to make clear, the compensation policy that is discussed by the public is 2.5% to 5%. But in fact, the policy says, or any other amount, but not above 5%, which in the opinion of the government, that's the Minister of Finance through the evaluation, will be deserving of the person. In other words, you may get less than 2.5%. You may get less than 2.5%. But whatever happens, you cannot get more than 5%. Yeah.
Okay, well, just before we leave this subject matter, we're back again to the Attorney General of the Federation in terms of the policy at work. Professor Wasonoye says, look, this is likely to be a system-wide policy. If you observe any wrongdoing, as you gave the example, say, of any establishment, if there's some wrongdoing, to whom should a whistleblower report? Attorney General, Attorney General's office, or the Minister of Finance, Federal Character Commission? I mean, if, for instance, NTA is employing persons only from one part of the country, or, you know, you have other issues other than corruption, X, Y, Z, to whom do you report? Are you creating a supervisory organ for purposes of wrongdoing and therefore whistleblowing?
Well, as far as fight against corruption is concerned, and indeed the whistleblowing policy of the government is concerned, the government institutions work in collaboration with each other. So it depends on the choice of the individual whistleblower. But then the bottom line is those whistleblowing informations that have criminal undertones must naturally be subjected to investigation. And if for whatever reason, for example, the whistleblower files the information onto the office of the Attorney General will assess the information, analyze it, and then if there is need to bring in either the police, ICPC, EFCC, or any other investigative agency inclusive of the Code of Conduct, we now pass on the information for further investigation. So the choice of the source of information substantially is that of the whistleblower. You can pass on the information to Federal Ministry of Finance, Intelligence Agency, EFCC, ICPC, Office of the Attorney General, Code of Conduct. But as far as that policy is concerned, the government institutions are working in collaboration. But then, if at the end of the day, the whistleblowing information that has been provided calls for processing of certain instructions and the formulation of agreement for endorsement by the parties, it is only natural that the Office of the Attorney General naturally comes into play, because it has the power, one, to accept information, two, to generate necessary letter of instruction, three, for the whistleblower to write in acceptance, and then, if the need arises, for the formation of a team to perhaps maybe search certain premises for the purpose of recovery of the looted funds, for example. The Office of the Attorney General naturally works with the police, EFCC, ICPC, or any other agency of the government responsible for the execution of the process to do so.
Okay, so for now, it's not as if there is a central portal or means to actually send this information?
There equally exists an electronic portal being processed and maintained in the Federal Ministry of Finance, particularly as it relates to the whistleblowing that comes in within the governance cycle, which, in which case the Federal Ministry of Finance now receives the information, analyze it. The information can be in writing from the whistleblower. It can be through the electronic a kind of a keying into the portal for retrieval by the Federal Ministry of Finance. But at the end of the day, if the Ministry of Finance analyzes the information and feels there is need for the external participation of investigative agency, it brings in the necessary agency. If, on the other hand, it simply translates to generation of necessary instruction, it passes it on to the Office of the Attorney General. But we have gone a step further. Rather than undergoing the tripartite process of application, instruction of, generating the necessary letter of instruction and acceptance, we have now, as far as the whistleblowing policy is concerned, kind of developed a single deed encompassing all these processes, which is being worked often between the Federal Ministry of Justice and Federal Ministry of Finance, and the first draft in that respect has been formulated, and in a couple of days we hope to conclude on it, so that we save the whistleblowers the attendant difficulties associated with the tripartite cycle of application, instruction and acceptance, in which case now the whistleblower can simply sign on to the existing deed, thereby creating the necessary obligation, so that we do not end up having problems settling the whistleblower after the execution of the assignment and eventual recovery.
Okay. One of the major challenges that persons faced in the past, particularly with the administrative policy of whistleblowing by the police, was that if you went to a DPO to report, to squeal on, on a known criminal or a known robber, oftentimes the police were alleged, to have disclosed to those robbers with whom they were in league, that look, Mr. XYZ came to report you to us, and there were instances where there were fatalities arising from repercussions. Now, what safeguards are there for the protection of the ID of a whistleblower?
Well, the fundamental safeguard and protection that are set into the process now is the political goodwill. I can tell you, for example, of recent, the Office of the Attorney General, working with the police, had succeeded in recovering, I think, over about 4 billion naira arising from information made available to the police by whistleblowers. This is the first time, I think, the police as an entity works hand in hand with the existing government agency to, at the end of the day, succeed in making huge recoveries arising from whistleblowing. The conventional practice, rightly or wrongly, I cannot clearly state, was that a whistleblower ended up being victimized by the system, particularly the police. But I think the trend is completely either changing, or I can say the position of things clearly now is that there is all agencies of government are keying into a common understanding of supporting the whistleblower, not only by way of providing the desired security protection, but indeed by way of working with a whistleblower to ensure at the end of the day that what belongs to him arising from the whistleblowing process is indeed fed to him upon recoveries by the relevant government agencies.
I don't know, Prof. Let's clarify this as well, speak to it. Is political will sufficient protection for a whistleblower? Look, if somebody decides to step forward anonymously to give information that is acted upon and a recovery is made and ultimately there's some benefit that comes to the individual, is political will sufficient to continue to shield his identity?
Actually, the policy itself does, first of all, guarantee identity. And I think that under the whistleblower policy, it is called protected disclosure. It's a protected disclosure. That's the basic underlying principle. That's number one. What the AG is saying is that the government's political will and determination at this time to make this work demands that whoever gives information will be protected. Now, there are two ways around it. Sometimes the whistleblower says, I don't want to be known. Sometimes he says, yeah, you can mention my name, that I'm the one. Two various approaches. That's number one. Whichever approach is followed, the policy itself guarantees the security of the person and affirms the integrity of government, that where the information you have given to us leads to a recovery, you will get your money. Because there's a lot of cynicism, not just about security of the person, but also about government's faithfulness to meet that obligation. That's what the AG was saying, that in order to reassure you, once you squeal, there will be something signed which you can hold against government to make sure that you get your reward. That's the document that he's saying has been worked on. So on all fronts, it's not only that the policy reassures. If you go to when you want to whistleblow electronically, the portal is the Federal Ministry of Finance portal. As soon as you submit your information, you get a response, which is electronic with a number, a tracker. That number enables you to track progress on what has been done. If you like, you can have an engagement with a responsible officer of government, either from AG's office, from Ministry of Finance, who have an obligation to protect your identity. Now, the concerns of the past are very well founded, but those were the days of analog operations. In today's world, people give a lot of information to law enforcement agencies without any physical contact. And we've been told of people who have whistleblown, even under this current policy, and said, I don't want any reward. I'm doing this for patriotic basis. Please check this out. So I think that we should understand that the policy itself is extremely comprehensive and addresses a number of the issues. And I think it is needful for us to explore and expose some of the other components of the policy for the consumption of the public.
All right, Honorable Jogo, yes, you've been itching to say a lot since the presentation from the other two guests. Where do we place all aspects of compromise and also protection for the whistleblower in all of this? Your new concerns.
Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. But let me still retract a little back. It's not as if I'm speaking from a different page with the AG or with the executive arm of government per se. But what I'm trying to say is that, after all, a government is not the executive that makes a government alone. A government comprises what you call the executive, the legislature, and indeed the judiciary that collectively form a government. So I want to say that we do not have any problem whatsoever with the policy, with the whistleblowing policy being initiated by government. We also don't have any quarrel that this is a global convention that happens in some other countries and it pays. We also have no doubt whatsoever that President Muhammadu Buhari's commitment to fighting corruption is a wholesome one to which the legislature had already keyed in, even with respect to our legislative agenda of the 8th Republic, the 8th National Assembly. But the fact remains, even when you refer to some of the questions you raised to the Attorney General, of course he said it was not very clear from his own perspective to respond to those questions. This is because we have the absence of a legal framework that will address the totality of this imagination.
Which is what is throwing back to
when
you.
You're coming, okay, when you're coming to fight corruption, it's of course a welcome idea, like I said. This is a policy that, of course, is engaged into a very huge political commitment. But the answer remains one, that political will, political determination, or the executive zeal to really fight corruption in this manner cannot succeed on the strength of a policy. it can only succeed on the strength of a legislation. And just like he has also rightly said, that of course agreed we have a law, that we have a bill before the National Assembly. That bill must have to pass through the procedural process of legislation. We cannot just rise overnight simply because of the urgency and the need to have a law to just close our eyes, skip first reading, skip second reading like the other speaker was suggesting, to just pass a law like that. We are not a block molding machine company. We are not also a bakery company where we just make breads overnight. We have set down procedures to which we make laws. I believe the bill has passed the first reading, second reading, it has now been committed to the committees. And when you make reference to the bill as it were in the last assembly, obviously by procedure, by practices of the National Assembly and legislature world over, when the bill was not assented to by the president, that bill is considered dead. And when the executive is now presenting another bill to that effect, we look at it as a fresh bill, and that is what we are obviously doing. I want to say, with every sense of responsibility and commitment, that on behalf of the institution I represent, the only thing that could provide some of these questions you have rightly raised is a legal framework. And I assure you, the National Assembly is taking the right steps to provide that legal framework. Agreed, Nigeria was a signatory to so many international protocols, and we need to really stand by that. But even in those international protocols, there are precedents and practices that must have to be based on an existing and coherent legal framework that will really provide for the penalties, and even in the case of, for instance, giving incentive or whatever to whistleblowers. Like he rightly said now, I want to disagree with him. It cannot happen, and it cannot go in a democratic setting when somebody frivolously blow a whistle, and at a point when there is no case in his blowing that whistle, then you end the story from there. For me, that marks the beginning of the story, because you can't allow Nigerians to ride on the advantage or on the strength of a law or on the strength of a policy to blow whistles frivolously, and at the end of the day, they indict or malign Nigerians, respected Nigerians, and you allow that to go scot-free. A law can provide answers to all these things, and I want to assure Nigerians that the National Assembly is doing a lot to really harmonize with the zeal of the executive to provide a coherent and effective legislation that will help them achieve this policy.
Okay, Honorable Adodogowa, thank you very much. I mean, your passion is infectious. I just, wanted to indicate a reminder, Blessing. Decree number 4 talked about protection of public officers against false accusation. Exactly. So that was Decree 4 of 1984. Of course, it was derived from an earlier decree in 1976. But those are issues that I would like you to address subsequently. Namely, besides the procedural matters that you have raised, what are the ingredients you would like to see in such a bill, or sorry, in such an act, if eventually it is passed, with regard to the efficacy of the law and all the things that the law is intended to achieve. We indicate also that we have tweets coming in from our viewers who have taken advantage of the Twitter handle at NTA GMN. Saidu Muhammad Lawal tweets, "It's a very good policy as it obviously aid the fight against corruption. Time will tell just how far it will go in doing so."
From Ibrahim Tude says the whistleblower portal does not include the state and local governments. Why? 80% of corruption exists in the subnational government as well.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, "Federal government's whistleblowing policy is great. It should be extended to individuals and organizations who abuse their positions or fail in their duty."
Another one from Ibrahim Tudu said, "It will be fantastic, successful if the whistleblower also include other behaviors like acts of crimes, drugs, and terrorism."
And then we have a companion piece from a companion tweet rather from Akimboye, where it says the National Assembly should enact a law forthwith that will make it mandatory for every government department to have effective whistleblowing system.
Change to progress. The whistleblowing policy is one good thing to have happened in recent times. It can only get better for us in rebooting Nigeria.
And Michael Makoji, many desperate Nigerians are now going about doing the work of EFCC and that of DSS in the name of this policy. That's desperation, it says.
From Frank Chinoso, the policy of whistleblowing should be a corrective responsibility to both government and the governed.
Now, Jetta tweets, says whistleblowing enables citizens to reveal looters living in their midst and oppressing them. It's a good policy. That's according to Jetta. Let's try to return to Lagos, to the Skype connection to Professor Oyewo. Professor Oyewo, of course, sorry, we lost you at some point because your connection was down. what exactly are your, shall I say, optimistic points about the new policy? The absence of a legal framework, is that necessarily a deterrence to the efficacy of the policy? Are there things you would like to see? Do you think that this is just a flash in the pan, that after some 6 months or 1 year, we're all back to square one and corruption will begin to thrive again?
I'd like to make a point on the discussion relating to the security that should be provided for a whistleblower. I think it's very important that a witness protection scheme be instituted. We should not be concerned
okay.
Oh my goodness, sorry, I was caught off guard there in a moment. Professor Oyewo, we have some challenge with connection to you. I don't know whether that is cleared up now. Well, that's unfortunate again. But Professor Oyewo, just keep your thoughts. We hope that once the lines are cleared up, then we'll come back to you. But Professor Wasonye, Professor Oyewo was already talking about a witness protection program. That has to do with, oftentimes, at the prosecution end of all the matters. We know what happens, for instance, say, the jurisdiction like the U.S., where you have that commonly amongst gangsters, where Sammy Gravano was a beneficiary of that after he squid on John Gotti. What exactly happens after whistleblowing? So, Blessing or myself will blow the whistle, what next?
It depends on the nature of the whistle that you have blown. As I said, if you've blown whistle that a crime is ongoing, the state has a duty, of course, to respond in order to curb the crime and all that. The gravity of the information that you have given will determine the kind of witness protection program to which government will place you. I think that the first thing that we want to recognize is that the current policy and approach identifies anonymity as a safeguard. That's number one. And so far, nobody knows those who have blown the whistle that have led to the various recoveries that we've seen in recent times. In the past, those names will be awash out there. At best, everything will be speculation. That's number one. We've not heard that anybody has been executed. Even before the policy was made public, there was a lot of recoveries that was going on. And those recoveries were not because people were consulting mediums. It's because information was being given to law enforcement agencies. Okay? So it's very important that we understand that a witness protection structure that applies to a whistleblower will depend on the kind of information that they have given. Now, I want to quickly respond to something that Honorable Dogo has said about a new bill. I absolutely agree with him that when a bill is passed in a previous legislature and is not assented to, and they have not taken time to pass it by the constitutional majority, it dies. However, the point I was making is that the whistleblower policy and the bill which is before them now is not entirely new. It's not entirely new. That means the legislature had processed such a bill before. If they wish, and their rules permit it, and I am aware that it has been used even in recent times, the process of crime bill, the rules were suspended in the House of Reps, first, second, and third, because they said, look, we've gone through this bill before, it's exactly the same in content, and the motion was moved, and it was passed without going through, which is an indication and a recognition of the urgency that it demands. Now, I think that there is an urgency, contrary to the fact that my honorable legislator feels that we can take our time. I don't think they can take their time. I think they should, in fact, fast track. The concerns that he has raised, that he strongly believes that a legal framework is what will reassure everybody. We agree. But the ball is in their court. So, if they buy into the policy, they should then accelerate and make sure that that legal framework comes on stream quickly. In coming up with that legal framework, they have a unique opportunity to eliminate concerns, like you rightly said. What are the things that make them uncomfortable? What are the things that make them comfortable? it will be and if they want to do a public hearing, they can do one quickly so that stakeholders can give information and all that. So whichever way it goes, I think that the response of the public and the gains that the policy itself has exhibited in the shortest possible time underscore its necessity. So it is just left for all of us to work together in harmony to make sure that we put clarity where there are gray areas and we put doubt to rest.
All right, Professor.
Listen, I was just going to ask, because the point, because this, of course, is the Chief Law Officer of the Federation. Attorney General, after the whistleblowing, what next? Is the government interested solely in recovery of misappropriated or looted funds, or there will be subsequent prosecution?
Well, the policy of this government, as far as any crime and criminal undertones are concerned, conventionally and traditionally, is that of recovery and indeed prosecution. So it has never been the policy of this government to concentrate exclusively on the recovery process without factoring in the possibility of prosecution. So after the whistleblowing, what follows is a joint process of recovery and prosecution.
All right, thank you very much.
Can I just quickly add that, in fact, the whistleblower policy validates what the AG has said. Where the disclosure indicates a crime has been committed, the Minister of Finance, who receives, if it's an electronic information, will send to the appropriate law enforcement agency for further investigation and then possible prosecution. It's very clear. So it doesn't suggest a trade-off.
All right, there will be more questions after we're done with this break. More tweets have come in, and I'm sure, gentlemen, you want to hear what Nigerians feel of our discussion this morning. We'll go on a break now. We'll be right back with Good Morning Nigeria.
Don't allow this thing to disgrace me.
It started with a race over nothing and something. Soon, the race became an issue. But what issue is an issue when the reason for the issue is not an issue?
People just they run for that. I don't know what they pursue them. Why would they run now? Somebody tell me, why should I run?
Join us in 100 meters this week on Professor John Bull. Another refreshing episode of your rib-cracking comedy and social satire.
Hello there.
Showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network, International, and Star Times.
Are you people safe? Yeah. Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
Okay, sir. You may now go in for your interview.
Thank you. Ah, my shoe. And to think I just bought this very expensive foreign shoe 2 months ago.
So sorry about your shoes. This is why I advise my friends to always patronize made in Nigeria products. See this shoe. It's made in Nigeria and I've had it for 2 years and it's still as good as the day I bought it.
Made in Nigeria products are good quality, and stringent government regulations and certification now mean that goods made in Nigeria meet international standards. Make the patriotic choice today. Buy right. Buy Made in Nigeria.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
You're welcome back, but if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have our guests here discussing the whistleblowing policy of the administration, and we have reactions already that have poured in. We took the first set of tweets. We have some other sets now, which we will take right away. And Ayuk, this policy is such a blessing to Nigeria. However, it is unfortunate that this information might end up in corrupt hands in government.
Gado Beatrice says the policy is a good idea, but is very, very dangerous to the blower.
Frank Chinon saw all arms of government should put their hands on deck to carry out this policy, especially the legislature. And there's a question here. Honorable Dogua, how many whistles have you blown?
Abu Malik says trusting the authority without legislative backing regarding whistleblowing is a risk for it's obvious the authorities were never trusted.
And then Michael Amakoji. People now report their enemies and perceived opposition to the authority, all in the name of this policy. Are we getting it right?
This handle from Nexus says, what is the position of the whistleblower stand of the federal government on the case of Jibrin, that's Honorable Jibrin, revelation on finances of the National Assembly?
All right, Ishak Saleh, as we as Nigerians support this great policy to checkmate all activities of government, individuals, and importers who are enemies.
Bello Sabo, going by the number of cases being exposed by the whistleblower anti-corruption agencies, must be adequately funded to perform.
Nathaniel Shock, Honorable Dogua, inasmuch as we need a legal framework to back the policy, there is no wrong way of doing the right thing.
From Jacob Lloyd, it's not all about the whistleblowing policy, but it's about government giving the blower an assurance that he is safe.
Okay, those are the tweets that we have in the meantime. In addition to that, Professor Oyewo, back to you in Lagos. Let's get your thoughts again on what concerns. You were speaking about the safeguards for the whistleblower under the current policy and, of course, ultimately under a legal framework. What other concerns would you like to share with us? And or what else would you like to see in the policy as at work now and then eventually as a piece of legislation?
Well, as Professor Owasonye noted, the policy as it is now is just a stopgap before the National Assembly passes the legal framework for the Whistleblowers Act. However, I think one needs to note that the National Assembly's process must be made to come within the public domain so that more and more articulation of all aspects of the framework in a way that we can benefit from experiences from other jurisdictions and also take cognizance of the peculiarly Nigerian problems. I have in mind, for instance, how do we monitor this? Because it's going to be an interagency framework. So how do we place priority or hierarchy for purposes of being able to monitor, supervise, and implement it? And when there are breaks along the chain, how do we trace it? That who, for instance, release the identity of a whistleblower to a person who is being investigated? And such matters need to be addressed in the legal framework.
Professor Oyewo, thank you very much. These are fresh concerns again we must look to. Gentlemen, Professor Owasonye, I think I might like to go take this, or any of you gentlemen. For many, let's take a look at this act of whistleblowing. For so many, say it's un-African. No one wants to now say, okay, I'm the one who revealed the identity of my brother in doing this particular act. Many are likely to frown at a person who will go blow the whistle that got, in quotes, a generous son of the community into trouble.
Or daughter.
Or, no, most times sons. So let's address this issue. These are fresh concerns, really, because at the end of the day, this is a society that embraces, okay, is supporting us or doing something great for the community. So why should I go and report it?
Well, I think that what is more African are the values of integrity, good name, and honesty that we always cherished. Somewhere along the line, things changed, and thieves have become celebrated and all that. And we have seen that indicated in situations whereby somebody is accused of corruption or is charged to court, and some charlatans will sow ashwebi with masquerade and drums and follow to court. They are not saying this fellow is innocent. They say, why? Is he the only one? Exactly. Why are you harassing? But you see, those are also indicators of failure of governance. Because if government had delivered what needed to be delivered to the community will not look up to somebody who has stolen public funds, has given 10 or 20 scholarships, built a town hall, and it's become their government and all that. So we've got to look at this holistically. Secondly, as to whether or not the whistleblower policy is going to work, I think we've moved beyond that. I think it's working. It's very clear. In spite of this understanding that, oh, we don't squeal on our brothers, we don't squeal on our sisters, it comes to a point. You know, there's a proverb that says that if your neighbor is eating something that is injurious and you don't tell the person, when the trouble starts, you are not going to be able to sleep. Now, we've got to the point whereby people recognize that even their brothers and their sisters and their neighbors who are doing ill, the cost, the opportunity cost of what they are doing upon them, okay, is very high. And so they have realized that they need to tell. The third point to make is that when you hear law enforcement agencies talking about intelligence, what is the meaning of intelligence? Somebody has told somebody somewhere, CEO, this is what is going on in that place. What's that? That's whistleblowing. You know, it's been with us. You cannot govern, you cannot enforce law, you cannot implement criminal justice administration without whistleblowing. It's just that in this scenario, this time, we've aggregated it under a framework, a policy, and all of a sudden it's looking radically different. We've attached a reward policy to it. It appears there is no sanction policy, but it's a sanction policy, which is of concern to my brother, Honorable Dogowa. There's a sanction policy. If you give, for example, malicious information about me, something that is not true, you said I'm a thief and all that, I can sue you. I have recourse. If I know that it came from you. If nothing came from it, even the policy itself says that anybody that gives a frivolous information that has caused the government, you start investigating, you spend money and all that, there is nothing to it. They ask you, where did you get this thing from? How did you arrive at what you told us? There is no substance whatsoever. The policy says you will be handed over, you know, and there are rules now for people, even extant laws recognize. You can prosecute such people under those extant laws. So it's not as if it's a dead end. It's not a dead end. If you provide information that is totally useless, cost the state diverted attention, or your information was a red herring designed to throw law enforcement agencies off the right scent that they ought to follow, you're in trouble. They're going to come after you. That's why the policy, the document that the AG was talking about, that will be endorsed, it will contain some of these safeguards that take note.
Okay. What kind of information is not actionable? In other words, we're talking about malfeasance, corruption, and so on and so forth. Under the policy rolled out by the Minister of Finance in December last year, would information about personal transactions also be part of it, Honorable Minister?
Well, the government's position as far as whistleblowing process is concerned, as it is now, is that transactions between individuals, particularly the contractual transactions and transactions of this nature, do not form part of the scope of the whistleblowing. And I'm happy equally to state that the trend now is that Nigerians begin to appreciate the public interest within the context of the integrity and prevailing values in our society much more than the individual interest. I have at my disposal cases whereby wife came over as a whistleblower against the husband in respect of certain acquisitions from the public funds over which she has been raising eyebrow without the husband now conceding to her demand that the funds should be returned. I have at my disposal blood brothers coming over to make available information, and in some cases without even making any demand. But the bottom line and the point of special interest in this regard is of recent, the whistleblowing coloration has extended to issues beyond financial misgivings, financial infractions. Only on Friday, the Office of the Attorney General, working with the DSS, were in receipt of an information that has security undertones by a whistleblower. And that information, relying on that information, the eventual search revealed the discovery of serious security equipment that ordinarily should not be at the hand and disposal of the individual from whom they were discovered. So the whistleblower truly is indeed a very good policy that has been accepted by Nigerians, and the coloration of which is now extending beyond the financial infractions to indeed security concerns. Added to that, we were in receipt of certain informations relating to the funding of the insurgents, associated informations relating to, financial infractions that were provided to insurgents and associated groups. So I think it's a policy that has been accommodated wholeheartedly by Nigerians, having regard to the public policy concerns associated with the infractions that are ongoing.
All right, Honorable Minister, Honorable Dogwa, we'll come back to you quickly, but let's just take a look at some of the tweets. You might need to respond to some of them. Kingsley?
All right, Timothy tweets, says we have defamation laws to take care of malicious information provided by a whistleblower.
Ibrahim System, looters can't fly money abroad, can't deposit in the bank, and can't hide it in their homes. Thumbs up for whistleblowing policy.
Mike Ayankwa, excuse me, please. A veritable instrument, that's the whistleblowing, a veritable instrument for identifying rogues in our polity. Now, the whistleblowers must be adequately compensated.
Bawa Nas, I like what Honorable Dogo is saying, but he should also understand the urgency to this act, and National Assembly should act based on that urgency.
And then Abdurrahman Elias, as good as whistleblowing policy would be, I'm only afraid of the National Assembly scuttling the policy, as is evident in Honorable Dogowa's argument.
Alhaji Ishaq Abdulhamid said there is something fishy with the participation of the National Assembly on this fight on corruption. Seems they are remotely controlled.
Ajadi Abiodun tweets, I fear for the security and protection of the whistleblowers. Uni-Lorin lecturer cases.
For the record, this is from Suleiman Zuntu. Domestication of the whistleblower legal framework is sacrosanct and germane, kind enough Nigeria's international image and with flavor, or kind enough for Nigerian international image and flavor.
Abubakar Muhammad says the whistleblower policy should include those civil servants living beyond their earnings.
Temple Oraiki, more whistleblowing is a great idea, but a legal framework is needed to avoid its abuse.
Emeka Ogbonna, Honorable Dogowa should encourage the National Assembly to expeditiously pass the bill if they are actually not out to kill it for some selfish ends.
And Charlotte Lesomi, I think the word frivolous information should not be handled in a way that would discourage people from offering information.
All right, those are the set of tweets, probably the last that will be taken in the course of this conversation. Honorable Dogowa, your response.
I think I need to start my response from the point of the point made by my colleague here, my co-guest here, which he said that there are issues that maybe the National Assembly should hasten and really expedite procedures to see to the passage of this bill. I have said it without any contradiction that the National Assembly is also institutionally committed to this fight against corruption. But one thing he must also note, and Nigerians too should note, that if you remember, he clearly said that in the 7th Assembly, this law was brought to the National Assembly and it was passed. For whatever reason, the executive arm of government or the president then did not assent to it. So that goes to tell you that no one of us as an individual or as a leadership or even as an institution or members of the National Assembly has anything that we are not comfortable with. We are very much comfortable with any drive by government to really check the excesses of corruption in Nigeria. So I want to say very clearly, my colleague here, that no one of us in the National Assembly is afraid of anything contained in the whistleblower policy. After all, I was a member of the 7th Assembly. I was a member of the 6th Assembly. I am also a senior lawmaker, just like you have son in the field of law, in the field of legal profession. I'm a senior lawmaker, and I want to assure you that as long as we had passed that bill in the 8th Assembly, we have no cause whatsoever contemplating passage of this budget at the moment. And I want to also say that there are no two ways about this. The fact still remains the same thing. We are arguing the same slogan. We are chanting for the same policy of government. But the fact remains indubitably one, that there must have to be an effective legislative framework that is not there in existence. And you must have to also wait for that legislation to come on board while you have the will, while you have the zeal, you have the policy, which is also a welcome policy, just like many Nigerians have said. But certainly you must have to wait for a framework, a legal framework that will give most of the answers, most of the critical answers you have asked, you have raised here. Take, for instance, the issue of what next after whistleblowing, or what next after exposure. Most of these things that you raise can only be answered by an effective legal framework which will provide explanation as what happens to the person who blows a wrong whistle, or what happens to the person that blows a very positive whistle and will now lead to the exposure and discovery of looted public funds. Look at also the next question, the question of, for instance, after the recovery, what do you do with the funds? These are also not explained in the existing extant laws we have. The fact remains that in a country like Nigeria, whereby in our budget, even in the 2017 budget, the budget is predicated on over 1/3 external and internal borrowing loan, but yet you have recovered funds in the custody of either the Attorney General of the Federation or the Central Bank or wherever. So these are funds that are recovered through the fight against corruption, but unfortunately, these funds have not helped the economy to really fund its budget. We have to go out borrowing. So we need a legal explanation. We need a law that will now provide the executive the instrumentality of the utilization of this kind of funds to really, in a way, be able to reactivate our ailing economy. Some of these questions can only be answered. The last question, the last response I must have to do. I'm sorry, Kingsley. I'm sorry, Kingsley. I have to answer this question. There was a question. There was a very clear question tutored, whether on the lighter mood or whatever, that how many whistles I have blown.
Yes.
It does not mean that Dogwa has to blow any whistle. But the fact remains that this is an avenue, this is an opportunity given to Nigerians to blow whistles for suspicious Nigerians to be able to help actualize this policy of government. When I have a cause to blow whistle, I'm a protected lawmaker on the floor of the House of Representatives. I have the protection of the law also to blow my whistle in a legislative manner. Okay. And I will do that maybe on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dogoba, assuming you need a whistle, the Attorney General of the Federation is here. When you're at the end of this program, he will hand a whistle to you. Since you are a senior lawmaker, you said, and he's a senior advocate of Nigeria. I used to think that they were ranking legislators. Chief Whip of the House of Representatives, Honorable Ado Dogoba, always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for your insights
this morning. Thank you so much, Kingsley.
All right. And then Professor Oyewo. Professor Oyewo would like to thank you, but I don't know whether you have, whether we have enough time. Well, fortunately, we'd like to thank Professor Oyewo, former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Lagos. He joined us, even though we had some glitches with the Skype connection. And then also here in the studios with us, the Secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption, Professor Bolaji Owasonye. We didn't have enough time to take a look at cross-jurisdictional examples that we could learn from. Perhaps some other time when we take on this topic, we'll take examples or lessons from other jurisdictions. So once again, we appreciate your insights.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, and then the Honorable Attorney General of, the Honorable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation. Let's get your last thoughts with particular reference to the points that raised by Honorable Dogwa with regard to the utility of recovered loot.
Well, one thing I have to make clear as far as the recovered loots are concerned is our law is clear. We have consolidated revenue account, we equally have the TSA account, and we equally have asset recovery accounts. All these accounts were accounts that were maintained, often and operated by the Federal Ministry of Finance in conjunction with the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. The Office of the Attorney General of the Federation does not maintain a single account and no kobo out of the recoveries that have been made through the Office of the Attorney General has been taken out of the proceeds at all. So whatever is recovered at the end of the day through the process of whistleblowing. The law regulates the position. Whatever amount has been recovered over time is analyzed in respect of those that are by law entitled to go into the consolidated revenue account, they go there. In respect of those that are supposed to go into the TSA account, they goes in. And in respect of those over which there is a pending litigation, perhaps, maybe interim order of a feature which now awaits the final order, they go into the assets recovery account pending the conclusion of the legal process. So what I'm saying in essence, that the Office of the Attorney General, the role of the Office of the Attorney General is simply that of recovery and then transmission into the federal government accounts as appropriate. No kobo is being maintained, managed, or in any way disbursed by the Office of the Attorney General as far as the recovery process is concerned.
Okay, that's the Attorney General of the Federation. Excuse me, please. Abubakar Malami, learned senior advocate of Nigeria. We'd like to thank you for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that does it for our discussion segment on Good Morning Nigeria today. Of course, there will be matters arising from the various issues raised by our guests. Many more whistleblowers are out there. There will be contradictions, of course, based on the positions of the various guests on this program. We move on now to our complimentary segment.
All right, let's take a look at the weather prospect for the rest of today.
Hello and welcome to the weather segment from the Nigerian Meteorological Agency. I'm Mr. Helen Bey. We expect hot day and warm night, especially in the south, in the next 24 hours, as we anticipate sunny and heat conditions from the north down to the central states. The southern cities should be in partly cloudy to cloudy skies, with isolated cases of thunderstorms around Benin, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Warri axis. I leave you with temperature forecast. Thank you for watching and see you again.
All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We appreciate your company. Let's do that again tomorrow as you join us at 7 in the morning. My name is Blessing Abu. Do have yourself a wonderful day.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Blessing in appreciating your being with us today. Do enjoy the rest of your day.